hopefully inform us in building a sustainable club coaching program. So in that section, we look at key areas that you might want to develop within your club in terms of coaching, and we'll talk about how we can ensure that those programs and those structures are sustainable and last. And finally, we'll just finish off with in the short term, and with the climate we're in at the moment, it's very, very uncertain, maybe. But what are the things we can do in the short term as coaches to keep developing our coaching program, and also keep engaging with our players, which is really important at a time like this. So we're just going to very, very quickly I'm going to just very quickly go through what the journey might look like for a typical player. And this is a slide that both myself and my colleague Porrick McDonald show to parents and show to coaches when we're delivering coach education courses or coaching workshops. And really the ultimate aim of this slide, I guess, and the point we want to get across is to, as coaches, to help our players navigate their way through the journey and help them reach their full potential. And that starts from when they come into our nursery at 5 years of age, and hopefully we get them right through our club program, and they get a chance to reach their full potential, whether that's at the senior adult level or whether that's at the recreational level. But I guess to borrow the phrase from the GAA, we ultimately want them to play and stay with the GAA. So what does the journey look like? First of all, it's about enjoying that journey, and players having a positive experience and coaches having a positive experience within the GAA club. So they'll come in at nursery, and from the nursery they'll go on to play their GO games from under 8 to under 12. And I guess, I know in some counties this journey can look slightly different, but by and large it's along the same pathway. At 12, 13, 14, they're introduced maybe to competition and competitive leagues and competitive championships right through along the rest of their pathway. And part of that journey, they might represent a development squad. If they go to college, they might be on teams. And along that journey, they'll have to balance their education commitments. So there's a big transition from primary to secondary school, where players maybe are leaving an environment where they're very familiar with and very comfortable with, and going into a completely new environment. And as coaches, are there ways that we can help them with that transition? They'll have more commitments maybe at junior certificate level in terms of their studies, and again at Leaving Cert. Some of them might even have part-time jobs. So really the point we're trying to get across here is, how can we help them get a balance in their lives between, we call them the 3 S's, their sport, their social life, and their studies. And it's not a matter of maybe giving up your sport to completely focus on your studies, or giving up your social life to completely focus on your sport. It's really about helping our players find the balance. And I guess really the point we're trying to make here, it's about the long-term development, and it's about the journey. It's not a sprint, it's definitely a marathon. Moving on from that, this is just a player pathway that we've adopted in the club. And it's used as a reference point, really, and a good guide for our coaches when we have to look at the areas that we need to focus on when developing our players. And you'll see within the pathway there are 5 stages to the pathway, starting from the fundamental stage all the way up to the training to win stage. And within those 5 stages, there are 6 phases. That's great. There are 6 phases, and starting with the physical literary skills, and we've seen all the research on those, our technical skills, our tactical skills, our mental or psychological skills, our physical skills, and then our lifestyle. So within each stage, there's areas that we need to work on as coaches to help our players develop in each of those phases. And again, it's a great reference point when we're looking at maybe what we should be coaching. I'm sure there's some coaches coaching at maybe at the under 8 level, and maybe at the under 16 level. and the focus can be completely different. So the pathway helps us guide that focus. So just moving on from that, having looked at what the journey looks like from the player's perspective and indeed the coach's perspective, having maybe become aware of maybe what the areas as coaches that we need to look at when we're coaching our players, it can inform us when we're putting together our club coaching program or our club coaching model. And maybe what are the things you need to consider when you're looking to develop your overall club coaching model. And this is, again, this can be adapted to suit the needs of your club. But some of the areas that you might want to focus on when you're looking to develop an overall coaching program, you might want to look at your school's program, and really you're looking at a connection with your schools, building that club-school connection. For example, I know maybe in some clubs you might have somebody who's retired, or maybe a student who might have time to go in and assist with the coaching in the local primary school, because you really want to build that sense of connection within the community between your club and your school. That might look like in the form of sharing facilities, for example, or maybe the school will allow you to go in and promote club activities and club events within that school. Ultimately, for a lot of clubs, the schools are, I guess, the recruitment grounds for the club. And really, you want to, as a GAA club, you need to be establishing yourself, in your local schools. The next, I guess, area you might want to look at is your nursery. The nursery is a really important area because it's the first introduction to the GAA club from the child and the parent's perspective, and you need to make sure that introduction is a really positive one. And the environment you set within a nursery should be all about fun, and it should be a friendly environment. If you're looking at the key coaching focuses there, it's really about fundamental movement skills. And again, physical literacy skills. We've seen all the research recently from Stephen Behan and DCU in terms of how important developing physical literacy or movement skills are. But we're also getting a chance to develop that connection and that sense of belonging to the club for both the parent and the child. Maybe it's their first time being involved in the GAA club, and you really want to make sure it's a positive experience. Some of the other strands you look at are the child strand. And we talk about the child strand, we talk about from under 8 up to under 12. And again, you're still trying to build on that connection, build on that sense of belongingness. You're trying to, I guess, win the hearts and minds of children and make sure that they keep coming back to the GAA club. Some of the coaching focuses, again, you're looking at developing their technical skills. Can we have bilateral players? Can they kick off both feet by the time they get to 12? Can they strike off both sides? Can they catch? Can they lift? Can they pass? Can they do all those skills? Also, it's a continuation on from the fundamental movement skills, which are, again, we know from research, are the building blocks of any athlete, and really they should be continued on. The environment you said, certainly when you're coaching children, should be one, again, that's fun, that's friendly, but it's also optimally challenging, because children want to be challenged. But as a coach, we need to know, the balance between over challenging them and just the right challenge. And again, you really want an environment where they can come down to your session and aren't afraid to fail, aren't afraid to make mistakes. Continuing on into the youth level, again, it's just a continuation on from developing their skills under pressure. You might go into tactical and team play development. You might increase their functional competence, and a great resource in the GAA is the GAA 15, and it shows you how you can include good movement patterns in a warm up and include the ball. Bearing in mind, we just looked at the youth and we looked at the journey. As part of your youth coaching, you have players who will have to deal with maybe studies, the pressures of studies, the pressures of exams. Maybe they'll have part-time jobs. Maybe they're on development squad teams. Maybe they're playing other sports. And again, as a coach, you're not trying to put more pressure and put more fill up their load even more. You're trying to really help them with that balance and take that pressure off. Again, I'm just going to very, very quickly touch on the coach education bit. If we have a player pathway, we should really have a coaching pathway for our coaches. If we have better coaches, we're going to have better players. And when we're coaching Gaelic games at this level, the minimum requirement now is a foundation level coaching award, and every club in the country should be, adhering to that, and the ambition should be, if you're going to coach in a GAA club, that at the minimum you have that award. And again, there's a good structure within the GAA of the formal coach education award, from the foundation award, leading on to the award 1, child, youth and adult, and even the award 2. But you might also look at some informal coach education in the form of coaching forums, and maybe bringing in some guest coaches into your club to focus on the areas that you feel as a club that need to be developed. I have attached at the end of this presentation some links to resources that will help you, fill in the content in each of those areas in terms of tactical and technical development. So there's lots of content out there that clubs can use when we're looking at developing our players. Really, if you're looking to develop your coaching model, maybe just start with one. Maybe start with one element and start developing that. And when that's up and running, you might move on to the next phase. If you could try to maybe some clubs, I'm sure most clubs have these areas well established. But if you don't, maybe just pick one area and start with that. Just moving on then to sustainability, and I think I've put up a couple of maybe funny graphs just for you to have a look at. But in some clubs, maybe coaching can be left to just one person, i.e. the coaching officer. And if that's the case, it's really not going to work. For this to be sustainable, there has to be a structure. And that structure might be in the form of, putting together a juvenile committee or juvenile coaching committee, or an adult coaching committee, or having both. Or maybe you're going to let the coaching officer in your club lead the way, but assist that person in the form of maybe establishing a nursery officer in your club, or a child coaching officer in your club, or a youth and adult coach, and maybe establishing a schools coach, or maybe putting somebody in charge of coach education. But then there's a structure around that, and you can also set targets. So maybe you'll want to retain. Hopefully, you can retain all your players throughout the course of the season, and retain all your coaches. But maybe you look at the end of the season: how many players did we retain? How many coaches did we retain? Maybe you're going to look at setting targets in terms of coach education. Maybe you want to set so many. Maybe you want to have so many people through the foundation award or through the award 1. Maybe you want to run a coaching forum. Maybe you've identified areas of coaching deficiencies in your club, and you can bring in a guest coach. So it's about having a structure to do all that. And really what it's about putting coaching on the agenda. And I know most clubs, between fundraising and development, there's a lot of stuff going on, and it costs a lot of money. But really, you need to, if you want coaching to work in your club, you really have to invest in coaching and making sure it's on the agenda at every juvenile meeting, at every adult meeting, and you're setting targets for yourself and your coaches in those meetings. A good example of maybe, I'll use my example of my home club in Galway, who recently engaged with their county coaching and games development committee and wanted to establish their own club coaching program. And this is a small rural club in Galway, I think, with 170 members. So they got 30 to 40 volunteers in a room. Someone from the county coaching and games committee came out, facilitated that meeting. They all had a chat about where they felt they were at as a club in terms of coaching, and then put together some work groups to establish things like a nursery program and a player pathway and a coaching committee. And they've successfully done that in a short space of time. But if that was left to just one person, that's very, very hard for one person to do. So if we're talking about sustainability, the first thing we need to do is make sure coaching is on the agenda and it's well supported within the clubs and it's invested in. I'm not going to talk too much around this slide, but really the point I want to make is that if we're looking at a fully functioning club, maybe what does it look like? I guess the key asset of any club is its people, and people make clubs work. And if you have people who, volunteers who are helping to raise volunteers who are coaching and playing, who are on committees, who are assisting in other areas in terms of establishing a quality game, quality coaching, age-appropriate coaching, interlinking with your schools and forming that community link with your schools. But the point is that people are the real asset in the club. Players, coaches, volunteers, people who sit on committees, and that's what clubs need to invest on. And if we can do that, well, then you have a greater chance of sustaining your coaching program in the future. Okay, just moving on from that in the short term, and I'm going to spend maybe the next 13, 14 minutes on this, because we find ourselves in a strange situation where we can't engage with our players on the pitch, and we're all in lockdown, and I guess we're in very, very uncertain times. What can we do as coaches in the short term, maybe to sustain our coaching program and to engage with our players? And there's been some ideas that clubs have come up with, and they've been excellent. And I'll talk through some of them in a few minutes. If you were to flip this on the positive side, it's probably a great opportunity for us as coaches, and maybe as a club, to self-reflect. If you're looking at your club coaching program, or if you're looking at yourself as a coach, where are we as a club in terms of our coaching? Or where am I as a coach? Why do I coach? Have your motivations changed as a coach? Have they stayed the same? Maybe you look at your own strengths as a coach. When you coach, what do you feel that you're really competent at? And is there an opportunity now for you to improve in certain areas? And that might, there's plenty of podcasts and books and resources out there that coaches can read up on, and online courses that coaches can get on to improve their coaching. Maybe it's a good time to ask your players what they think of you as a coach. Maybe ask your players, and as a club, ask your coaches how they feel about the club, and maybe where they feel coaching stands in the overall aspect of the club. I guess ultimately in the short term, maybe we can look at how can we become a better coach, and how can we engage with our players over the next 4 to 6 or 8, 10 weeks. I've attached on the slide, on the presentation, a self-reflection coaching questionnaire. And if you're looking to upskill, maybe it might be an idea to fill up that questionnaire. And it first of all identifies what you're good at, maybe in areas that you might want to upskill on. This is an example of, again, I'll just use Kilmacud Crokes as an example. These were our under-9 coaches a couple of months back. They wanted to get some feedback on their coaching and I guess their coaching environment for the players. So they put together a simple Google Docs form, and they sent it out to the parents, and they asked the parents to fill this out with the input from the child. So they asked the child the question, and along with the help of the parents, they'd get the answer. So there's some really interesting questions that the coaches asked. And if you look at the third column, and the question was asked, what is fun for your son? And a lot of them, the answer that came back was, again, games, blitzes, meeting friends. They mentioned some of the games that they like playing. Interestingly, winning out of 51 participants in that completed the survey, winning was a long way down. And when they asked the question below that, name one thing that your son would like coaches to do more of, and again, you can imagine the answer that came back. It was more games, more blitzes, and I think that just was a nice way of I guess, interacting, engaging with the players. This might be something that you can do as a coach, or maybe as a club, get some feedback in terms of from your players or from your volunteers or from your team in relation to your coaching, and how you can plan for that when we all do get back on the field coaching with our players. So again, this is just continuing on from the short term. In the middle here, we have, I guess, the player development wheel, and you can see different slices of the pie in terms of, as coaches, where we need to develop our players on. Some of the ideas that we've seen clubs and coaches do in the last couple of weeks have been the weekly skill challenges, and they're really effective because ultimately it's a way of engaging with your players, and ultimately it's a way about ensuring that when we're all trying to establish a new routine, we've all been knocked out of our daily routine. It's about ensuring that GAA stays in the routine. If as a coach, if you're used to coaching on a Tuesday and Thursday, and the player is used to training on a Tuesday and Thursday, maybe can we still fit that routine into that weekly calendar? And the skill challenges are a nice way of doing that and encouraging players to practice their skills at home in the back garden. Some of the weekly session plans, again, I've seen some coaches send out, are excellent. They include descriptions of the activities or the games, and some of them have even included some YouTube clips and some clips from Twitter or social media in terms of how this skill or activity can be completed. And they're all great ways of, again, just engaging with your player and engaging with your fellow coaches. So what else can we do? So to influence, when we look at the player development wheel, how can we influence their even more over the next few weeks, their tactical developments, their team play development, their physical or psychological? How can we educate them on their lifestyle? So I'm just going to throw at you a few ideas that I've started to use, and hopefully you'll get something from that. Brendan Harper was on last week and did a brilliant presentation on player profiling. I think it's crucially important that every coach, and Brendan recommended from 14 upwards, is probably an ideal time to start player profiling. It's always left in the long finger because it takes time, and if we have nothing else over the next few weeks, we have time to player profile. The benefits of player profiling, as Brendan outlined last week, it creates a self-awareness within the player of first of all what they're good at, areas that they're strong on, and maybe areas that they could improve on. It's a great way of starting a conversation. And again, if you're going to, whatever form of communication you're using, if that's email or whatever way you're using to communicate with players, if you can send, it's a great way of starting a conversation, and all you need to do is send out the form, get back the form, and then it's a nice way of opening up that conversation. It also builds a great understanding between the coach and the player. It helps the player understand maybe where your perspective, and hopefully as a coach you'll greatly better understand the player's perspective when it comes to maybe technical development or tactical development, or why these areas are important. Most importantly, with the player profiling, it develops an action plan, and as a coach we can help a player develop an action plan over the next few weeks. And again, that's another way of keeping them engaged while we can't go on the pitch and coach them. Brendan had a brilliant player profiling sheet he showed last week. Mine is very, very similar. There's a couple of subtle differences. I need to credit this to Colin Clear from Leinster GAA. I took this off him, and I used it when we were player profiling some of the Laois players earlier on the year. And again, it has some of the same headings as Brendan's sheet showed last week. Again, we've seven or eight areas in terms of technical, defensive, running, attacking play, psychological focus, components of physical fitness, and game understanding. So I've just filled in some numbers randomly to give you an example of what this looks like. If you look up at the top heading where the name is, and then you'll see player PRI, player score, coach PRI, and coach score. And this is where the conversation can get really interesting if you can get this data from the players. The player PRI stands for the player's perceived rate of importance. So how important does the player perceive that skill to be in relation to his own game? So if you look at first touch, for example, and I've just thrown in some numbers here, in this case the player perceives the first touch, he gave it out of 10 a score of 5. So he doesn't think it's that important. In saying that, he's given himself or herself a score out of 9. The coach PRI, I put that in as 5. Most coaches will put a first touch in at a 9 or a 10, because whether you're playing Gaelic football, ladies football, hurling or camogie, your first touch is crucial. And interestingly, the coach has scored the player's first touch as 5. So straight away you see a big difference between the 9 and the 5. But as Brendan said last week, if you're starting a conversation, it's better to start the conversation on something the player is good at, and open the conversation in a positive sense. What this Excel sheet workbook does, and I've attached to the presentation so you can go and look at it in your own time. You can create a spider graph, and you can see if you see let's look at the technical aspect, and within the Excel sheet at the bottom there are different subheadings: technical, defensive, attacking, and if you click into each of those, a different spider graph comes up. But let's look at a technical, for example, and all the scores have been color coded. So the player's PRI is in blue, the player's score is in orange, the coach PRI is in grey, and the coach score is on yellow. So straight away you can see the gaps between the coach's score, which is the yellow, and the player's score, which is in orange. And let's just take the first touch, and you can see the gap. And again, very, very quickly, if you can see that, and if that's information that you've gotten back before you have the conversation with the player, it can inform your questioning, and it can help plan for a better conversation. Because the point being is that now is a great opportunity for us as coaches to go and work with our players and help them develop an action plan over the next few weeks, and keep them motivated and keep them engaged and help them become more competent. And that might be, you might decide that you might have an online conversation or a phone call after you've got the data back from the player. You might do 4 players a week, and over the course of 4 or 5 weeks, you more than likely will have had a chat with every player within that squad, and they'll all have had a time to chat with their coach and develop an action plan that they can work on at home or in the back garden in the short term. Another, we're talking about now the use of technology and how it can help our coaching in the short term. This is a free app I use. It's called Tactical Pad, and it's a great application if you're trying to coach things like movement or tactical or team play elements of the game, or ways that you'd like your players to play. So I'm just going to quickly click here and give an example of what Tactical Pad does. Visually, it's a great coaching tool for players. So if you're looking to coach inside movement, for example, you can maybe give players examples of what that movement might look like. If it's kick out or poke out strategies, again, you can mark out areas. Or if you're looking for a player to play deep, again, it has all those features. How can we use Tactical Pad as an example to engage our players and to even further develop their tactical and team play development? Well, here's a slide. Here's might be an exercise that you might give to your players over the next few weeks. And these are all problems that players encounter and coaches encounter when we're playing matches. Whether it's defenders being dragged all over the place by forwards shooting from difficult positions, or forwards bunching when the ball is going in. It might be an idea maybe to give these tasks out to your players and ask them to come back with what they feel their solutions might be. They might download Tactical Pad and send you on their solutions through Tactical Pad, or you might use Tactical Pad to maybe show what the best option might be. You might even have a competition and have a prize for some of the best options the players give back to you. Ultimately, it's a different way of engaging players and giving them autonomy. We want our players to be able to make decisions for themselves on the pitch. We want our players to take ownership on the pitch, and this might be a first step over the next few weeks on how you can do that. Giving them tasks, giving them problem solving ideas, and asking them to come back to you with solutions. Again, we're nearly up time wise, so I'm going to fly through the rest of it very, very quickly. Another coaching tool that's used, I'm sure, by many coaches is this thing called freeze framing. And how does freeze framing work? Well, on the left we have a player who's gone in to dispossess their opponent, and it's a great way of showing players maybe what good technique might look like. And especially if you're working with younger players or younger children, it can be a nice way to engage or send through their parents some photos or shots of what good practice looks like, and it gives them a picture in their head, and when they're looking to execute the skill, what that might be. Again, another idea, I got this through Philip Kerr, and Philip uses an app called Hudl Technique, which I'll cover in a second. And I suppose, like every coach, you're stealing everybody's ideas and you're putting them to use yourself. But this is another way of using freeze framing. I'm going to play this clip here very, very quickly, and this is just a match. And this is you might send your players a clip, and you might ask them in that clip, okay, what's the option with the player in possession? And at this stage, his only option is to keep going. But you might have different snapshots in games of players in possession or not in possession. And you might, again, a bit like the task I showed earlier, ask them to come back to you with maybe what they would do in that position. And again, how you engage that, again, it can be through your different forms of communication that you're using with your teams at the moment. You might also send them some good YouTube clips. Maybe you're working on a certain element of in your team play. It might be, a good forward movement, or it might be good distribution. You might find clips on YouTube and send them to your players to give them a picture of what it looks like. And you might ask them to work on, certain skills that they'll need to get better at, to execute some of those scenarios. Again, I'm just going to move on to another app, another piece of technology you can use. And I first came across this when Philip Kerr came down to the club, and he delivered a brilliant coaching workshop to our coaches. But he was really at the time focused on, how can we really break down coaching and really coach the individual. And one of the piece of technology he used was Hudl Technique. And Hudl Technique is a free app you can download, and it's absolutely fantastic. So because it gives you a split screen of maybe somebody like Tommy Walsh, for example, on the right, who can show striking from the hand and what best practice looks like, and then somebody on the left, such as one of our camogie players who's just beginning the game and learning to strike from the hand. And it allows you, I'll just play it here so you can see what it looks like. So again you can freeze and move, and when you go onto the app, you're able to draw and add comments, and you're able to identify matching points and mismatching points. The question is, how can we use that with our players over the short term? Well, maybe it might be an idea for a parent you're engaging with, maybe new to the sport, new to Gaelic games. They might be able to record their child executing a skill. They can send it on to you, and you can give them feedback and send it back to the parents. Again, it's a different way of communicating and a different way of coaching over the next 8 to 10 weeks. And Hudl Technique, allows you to do all that. It also might be for a free taker in your club, if it's looking at good kicking technique or good striking technique or good body position. Again, if an adult player, for example, or a minor player is looking to improve some of those special skills, they can record themselves and send those clips on to you. So again, it's just it's about thinking outside the box, and it's about thinking, how can I engage my player? How can I keep developing my coaching in the short term? They're just links to some useful resources that you can click in and use and look at it in your own time. It'll help fill the content if you're looking to establish an adult, a child strand coaching in your club, or a youth strand coaching, and maybe some of the things you might want to include. There's some brilliant resources in some of those links, and I'm sure hopefully you'll get something from them. I suppose some of the key take-home points in relation to the presentation. If you're going to establish a a really sustainable coaching program, clubs need to start putting coaching on the agenda. If that's in the form of a juvenile coaching committee, if that's in the form of establishing their own club coaching committee and setting themselves little targets and little aims that they want to achieve. And you'll find very, very quickly as a club that there's a lot of things that you're doing well. The schools might be going well, maybe the child focus might be going well, but maybe you might need to do a bit of work on maybe the youth. But having some sort of a evaluation system in place for your coaching program, so you know what's working and what's not working, and having some targets in place that you can reach, because like us all, we all need to be motivated, and we all need to be encouraged, and setting little targets can really help with that motivation. In the short term, it's really about engaging with the player. And I was down the shop last week and I met one of our under 15 coaches, and I asked him how were they getting on, and he was saying to me, look, struggling to get the young fella out of the bed, but at the same time he was up to 15 chin-ups. So even the point being that if we can find ways to engage our players, set them targets, encourage them to keep developing, they will. So when we do get back on the field, we will be in a better position as coaches. We'll be better organised. Maybe we'll have got time to self-reflect and upskill, and our players will have kept developing in certain areas of the player developmental wheel. That's okay. I hope I covered everything. I think I've covered everything. Thanks for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions of anybody if they have some. So over to you, Peter.
Thanks very much, Niall. Thanks for that presentation. Very, very clear, with lots of really, really good, simple ideas for all of us to take on board. For those of you that have any questions to ask on Teams here, when you roll your mouse over the middle of the screen, you can see a few icons pop up. One of those is a little speech bubble, and it's a show conversation or a chat. So if you want to type in any question that you have there, and I can ask Niall each of the questions rather than using the microphones, if that's okay. Niall, Barry Dunn in Waterford just asking, is Hudl free or a paid app?
It's a free app to download, and there's certain features you can use for free, and there's enough free features you can use that will help you to engage with your player. You can subscribe to it and it'll give you additional features, but the app is free to download.
Thanks, Niall. I'd say we have about 10-15 minutes or so for questions if people want to just type in their own. There's no issue at all. Niall, just maybe for myself, some questions. Obviously, technology can be really, really good for coaches, but maybe for our experience here in the last couple of weeks is not everyone's broadband has really been hectic for sending these things around. So is there anything, have you encountered any issues with some coaches or really good ideas that some of your club coaches come up with for those?
Well, I suppose the smartphone is a nice way of recording skills or recording sessions and sending them on to the parent, or sending them that way, I guess, through your smartphone. Some of our coaches again have emailed out great session plans through the parents in terms of what players can be doing, and have found great YouTube clips and clips from Twitter that identify what the activity is and how the players can execute it. So yeah, they're kind of some of the things that our coaches have been using. Some of the things that I've seen. The skill challenges are obviously a great idea, but how sustainable they are over the next few weeks, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, Kevin Kelly, question here. Kevin from Ulster, you might know. He's like Crokes is a massive club, so a huge number of players. How many games are you trying to get for every player per year, just as a sort of rough idea? And roughly how long would you think the season would be?
Yeah, well, I suppose it's slightly different in Dublin, where the summer is a bit quieter in Dublin, where down the country games are in full flow. But let's just take the Go games, for example, the CCC one. If our players, which a lot of our players are dual players, they'll get Go games alone. They'll get 26 games in the year, and then we'll have football festivals, hurling, camogie festivals. We'll have trips away, and there'll be more games onto that. If you look at the older age groups, for example, our under 14s, they'll get dual players will get 14 games in terms of league, and again they'll have the Fail Blitz, or they might have championships, and again they'll use away trips. So they have a huge amount of games. I'm not sure what the structure is in other counties, but the games program in Dublin is quite good.
How would you try and encourage mentors in your role as a GPO to develop their coaching and attend workshops and courses and things like that?
Well, the first thing you might do is maybe just audit your coaches and find out what they're interested in. What are the things that they find interesting? Asking their motivation. So why are they coaching? Is it because maybe their little girl or little boy is involved in coaching, but maybe what else do you like about coaching? So maybe asking the question, well, maybe what workshops would you like to go on? What forums would you like to run? Again, some of the things that both Pádraig and myself organising Crokes would be an annual coaching forum where we bring in guest speakers and guest coaches, and to give their perspective on coaching and different topics within coaching. There are so many strands of coaching nowadays, but it's about really keeping everybody engaged and having somebody for everybody. So the January forum has worked well, and through the course of the year the last few years, we've had people like Mick Bowen and Philip Kerr and Christy O'Connor, we've Michael Fenley. So these all add to, I guess, when coaches see these coaches coming into the club, it can help them engage more in the coaching process.
A couple of questions are sort of very are coming through from a few different people, so very similar questions, I should say. So more or less, the profiling of players that you spoke about there, would you keep a record of those over time? So you might have built it up over the years from 14 to 16 to minor and onwards.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I haven't. When I came across Colin Clear's sheet there, it was pre-Christmas, and I've started using it with the Laois guys, but I wouldn't have really done it up to that, if I'm being honest. But I think you should, because if we're looking at the development of a player, I think it's really good to have that information. What we do, what's useful that clubs might do, we have handover evenings at the end of the year, so where coaches get a chance to sit down and, for example, the under 12 coach might sit down with the under 11 coach and say, "This is what I did through the year. This is the activities I did, the games I played, the festivals I went to. Here's what worked for me. Here's what didn't work." And it's a great way of, I guess, creating that community of practice. So coaches get a chance to share information, to share ideas, to swap ideas, to find out what worked for the coach ahead of them, what didn't work. Go back to the player profiling thing. We've kind of done a small bit of analysis, and Pádraig's done more some stuff in the football, where we've looked at the player at under 12 and his progression through minor. So at under 12, for example, that player might have been, a B player or even a C player. And what we're finding, by the time they get to minor, we're getting 3 or 4 players who were once maybe a B or C player at 11 or 12 are suddenly a minor A player. And we probably need to do a bit more work into that to see maybe how it's coming through. But I've no doubt that the game program is helping, that players are getting games and they are developing. But if you had a player profiling sheet for a player from 14 and then you kept that log up until minor, I think that's fantastic information to have.
A couple of questions again, and William Harmon is one, and it's the name down here is Modern Harps Ladies Football. is about how often or should coaches engage with young players at the moment, considering first of all for young players that have to go through the parents, and second of all, a lot of parents will be fairly overwhelmed with what's going on in general, maybe having to work from home and so on, as well as everything else.
Yeah, look, I suppose it probably depends, really, doesn't it? I think your last point there is really relevant, that players or parents are having to deal with so much, with maybe with working from home, with children not being in school, and are completely trying to establish a new routine, and suddenly you're throwing all it from a coaching perspective, information at them. They're overwhelmed, and it can actually, it can really demotivate the parents. So look, maybe once a week is probably enough to engage with your team or with your players, and you're giving them maybe a program of work for that week, and that might be through, look at it for older players, it might be through a Skype call. For adults and for younger players, you might chat to the parents or send that of the program of work that you'd like them to do for the week. So maybe generally once a week. But I think the crucial thing is that the GAA is kept in the daily routine or the weekly calendar. So they're not getting used of, maybe look at it, I used to train on a Thursday or coach on a Thursday. That's gone for 8 weeks, and suddenly we're back, and suddenly they've established anything. So it's about really keeping Gaelic games in their weekly calendar, I guess, Peter.
Thanks, Niall. Just a couple of more. One, Donald Hogan here is looking at how you might generate those skill challenges on video that challenge stronger kids without stressing out the weaker kids.
Say it again, Peter.
So, for example, if you're creating maybe a skills challenge or for your players, maybe on video or using something else, you want to set it that obviously the stronger kids are challenged and stretched a little bit, but also not overwhelm the slightly weaker kids.
Yeah, and again, it depends how you set the challenge. You might have, I know with some of our coaches, they're having skill challenges within their own age groups, and part of what they're doing is that they're having, different categories. They'll give a prize for effort. They'll give a prize for a good kick or a good strike. They'll give a prize for creativity. So maybe that's a way to create those different levels. I again, attached to this presentation are the Crokes awards, the skills test that we use for our players from under 8 to under 12, or maybe using the Go Games challenges as a way, because in those challenges there are different levels in those challenges that a player can achieve, and also can find optimally challenging. It comes back to really, if you're going to design those skill challenges, you need to really know your players and what level they're at, and what they can and can't do, and maybe you need to come up with a method or a way of maybe having a series of challenges for your weaker players, but letting everyone try those challenges. Maybe having a series of challenges for your stronger players, and letting everyone try those challenges, so everyone feels that they can do something.
Thanks, Niall. And just for everyone to know, a number of people are asking questions. Yes, all the resources that Niall has spoken about here are available, and they will be on the GAA Learning site after this session. And thanks very much to Niall and Crokes for sharing those. I know an awful lot of work went into producing them, so it's great to share it amongst the community. Just a couple of questions about maybe more organisational stuff in clubs and getting the Crokes experience, Niall, about whether coaches stay with their own age groups, or do they follow on for a variety of years, for example, from under 8 up to minor, for example?
Yeah. In Crokes, most of the coaches will stay with their team. But I know, for example, in football, at 13 or 14 onwards, that the coaches alternate, so that the coach isn't coaching his son or daughter, and that takes time to develop, because you're looking at most coaches, if they have a child involved or a player involved, they'll want to stay with that team, and if they've brought them all the way up from nursery, they'll want to stay with them. But interestingly, we're doing a project we're trying to implement a psychological pathway in the club from 13 to 18, and we've got the help of Anya McNamara and DCU, and some of the research that she's given us is that it's good for players to experience different coaches, because they can. They're able then to communicate, and they're able to get a different experience or a different perspective from a coach. So it's something that we're trying to implement in the club, that our players are getting different experiences, because like most clubs, you've coaches who might be brilliant at coaching striking or coaching kicking, or you might have coaches who are brilliant at athletic development, and it's about getting our players exposed to as many of those coaches rather than staying with the one coach all the way up along. So to answer the question, we're trying to go that way, but that takes time, and look, it takes a lot of communication and understanding from coaches, but it can be done.
Thanks, Niall. Owen Burnock in Waterford is asking about juvenile players and whether they're dual in the club, and how the seasons operate then. Are they split season or same time? And whether you have different coaches for hurling and football groups, and the sort of planning that goes on between that. That's a lot in one go, but...
Yeah, I'll see, can I take it all? 90% of our players, certainly juvenile, are dual players. So 6-7 years ago, we introduced a dual nursery for the first time in the club, where players came down and had an hour of hurling, football, and fundamental movement skills. And as a result of that, both the player and the coach and the parent have got into coaching both codes, and there really is no difference. 70-80% of our coaches now are dual coaches, whereas before that wouldn't have been the case. But because it's all they know, and when they come into the club, it was a combined effort. And ladies football and camogie have gone the same way, and yeah, it's really positive, because there's a huge amount of the teams are big. Each age group has nearly 100 players, and you can imagine the organization in that. So the games program from Go Games, they play every second week. So or if they're dual players, they'll play every Saturday in the Go Games, and over the course of the year they'll get 26 to 28 games, not including some of the blitzes we play outside of that. So they'll play the Go Games from February or March up until maybe June, and then they'll go back and play Go Games from August to October. So in terms of the games, there's a huge opportunity to play those games.
Thanks, Niall. I think we're okay on the questions. I want to just say thanks to Niall Corcoran on behalf of all the people on the call today, with over 200 people on this call. It was great to see. Last question, Cara Carberry, you just got in. How many sessions per week are your lads training, roughly, would you suggest?
So at the juvenile level, they'll do one hurling, one football, and on the Sunday mornings from a hurling perspective, mainly to do one midweek session. At the weekend, we always put together an optional session on a Sunday morning, or if it's a football on a Sunday afternoon, where maybe players who aren't playing other sports can come down and kick a ball or strike a ball. So between 1 and 2 a week, and then after that, then they're doing 2 sessions a week.
Perfect. Thanks, Niall. Again, like I suggested there, thanks on behalf of everyone here for your insight, for sharing your information, for sharing what you do in Crokes, and for giving us lots of great ideas that we might implement in our own clubs as time goes on. Just for everybody to be aware, the registration form for the next of these sessions, which will take place next Tuesday evening, with Owen Mooney. Owen is from Fermanagh originally, but has actually just started working in Dublin, GAA now as well. That session will be on at 7:30 next Tuesday. Registration opens for that at 9 o'clock this evening on the same webpage that you registered on the last time. Please note that you do need to register each time, because the link for each of the meetings is different. So if you register tonight and it was your first time registering, you do have to register again for the next session, but it's all managed from the same page. So that's just information for everybody involved. So thanks again, Niall. And we want to wish you well for the rest of the year, and hopefully we'll get back on the playing fields very, very soon.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Peter.